This, who is an expert on respiratory systems, and so I asked him to come here and watch our course. You have a problem?
No. We never.
We're happy to have you.
That's right. No, Professor Elonidis is working very much on chronic obstructive disease. And we have a number of publications together. Remember when I came the first time, I told you that there are a few areas in which, for one reason or another, I had gotten a soft spot in my heart for? Well, I told you that pneumology was one of those. It is because my friendship with him that we have worked so much on the lung. Anyway, one of these days I should organize for you to come to Thessaloniki, all of you.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be happy to.
I saw pictures.
Well,
I tasted a honey from Greece at Anetta's house.
Okay. So you have been there. Okay. Are we all in place, or are we waiting for? Today's Friday, right?
Yeah, we're waiting for two. Takashi and Norman. What time is it? What time is it?
It is 1:30, but it's okay. All right.
We'll wait for a couple of minutes.
We'll wait for 2 minutes, no problem. Let me ask you, the concepts that we tried to talk about this morning, did they come out okay? Any questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was pretty clear, right?
And Mariah Carey.
Yeah, what was that?
That's 25 minus 6. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I like that song. I can't remember what it's called though.
I can probably find it pretty close to
Yeah, that's what it is. And Mariah Carey.
You have quite a lot to cover.
That's 44. 42% increase. How did you get that?
It goes from 156 to 225.
I got 44%. 41%. Oh, well, maybe it's just...
Oh, maybe because I didn't count.
Oh, okay.
I heard that you went up to the hospital yesterday, was it?
Yeah.
So tell me, what did you see there?
Hamid did an experiment.
Hamid, what did you do?
Hospital.
Oh, we did. Oh, yeah.
What was it? Capacity.
I don't remember the name of the test that we did. What was it? Spiro.
Oh, spirometry. So you blew into the pipe, right?
Yeah.
And you watched the, well, so what did you learn to measure? You learned to measure the forced expiratory volume in 1 second?
Exactly.
Yes.
Fib in 1 second.
And
Forced vital capacity?
Vital capacity, yeah.
So you know what all these things are, right? Because not today, but next time we're going to start with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit, yeah.
We have to still go over it, but we were introduced to it.
That's what I mean. I mean, if you're introduced, this is good enough. Do you have any? I mean, now in your head a little bit some idea of why we do these tests?
Yes.
Yes.
See abnormalities.
to see whether it's an obstructive disease.
That's very good. I like to hear that. So go ahead. If it is obstructive or restrictive, right?
Yeah.
And how do you distinguish the two?
Obstructive is when you cannot read out.
By means of the parameters that you
Right?
measure.
The volume is greater in one.
That's correct. It is a matter of the volumes, okay?
Yeah.
The question is how, in fact, most people can expire the same air anyway. It just takes longer to expire it if you have obstructive disease, okay? And you have reduced volume if you have restrictive disease, because you can never fill up.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are going to talk about these things next time and give you the... You'll have your bearings very well on this thing. What to watch for, that is, when you look at spirogram. Maybe I'll bring some spirograms myself here next time. I'm just making an arrangement here with my clinician friend to get some spirograms together for you on Monday.
Monday, we're coming on 9:30, right? Or 9 o'clock? Yeah, 9:30. 9:30, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Monday at 9:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
9:30 to 11:30?
9:30 to 10:30.
Wish.
All right, should we start? You feel it? Or should we wait for another few minutes for Takashi?
Oh, he's gonna come, it's okay.
We can start.
Okay, let's start. Okay, let's start from where we left last time. Let's go over the last 3 or 4 slides, okay? If you recall this slide, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you recall what we said, that if you try to expire, okay, that is, if your diaphragm is going to increase the pressure it puts on the lung, then the whole parenchyma of the lung is going to try to push on the airways. This is why you are going to have you are going to block the airway on the way out as the air tries to go out, okay? And we said that if you have blockages over there because of mucosa or abnormalities of the mucosa or spasm in the bronchial muscles, okay, you have a different profile than what you are going to have if the problem that you are facing is farther down towards the periphery, so-called, of the bronchial tree, correct? Okay, now we said that the expiratory compression can reduce the lumen of the large airways by a factor of 4. And I told you that this happens because there is a collapse, actually, of the airway, because the rings around it, especially in the large airways, are not round. They are U-shaped, correct? And therefore, the airway can collapse. If it was totally round, like in the small bronchioles, then we wouldn't have problem of collapse. But they are not totally round. They are U-shaped. Okay? Now, this means that the large airways have small reserves of patency. That is, they can sustain only so much. And this is why, if you have expiratory compression, then this is a very, very difficult feeling to have. And it's a very difficult situation to have. Okay? And we gave an example. We said if we take a mucosal swelling which reduces the diameter by 0.2 of a millimeter, then in the trachea the actual reduction in the size in the bore of the trachea is only going to be 2%. However, if you go one step down to the segmental bronchi, this is almost 6%, and if you arrive at the bronchioles, a 0.2 of a millimeter mucosal swelling can literally create reduce the diameter by the area, the available cross-section by 50%. Now, if you have this in mind, you'll understand why you have to be very careful if you get into an anaphylactic shock, because you have an increase in the mucosa, the thickness of the mucosa, and immediately you choke yourself. Literally, you choke yourself. This is why you have to act very fast. A lot of people that have kids that are, you know, they're anaphylactic to different things should watch for that, and even bigger, you know, older people. Okay? On the other hand, if we go to the small airways, okay, if you have a spasm, then the obstruction doesn't help. I mean, it's not going to be felt. Why? Because there is a lot of them. So even if you reduce it by a large amount, there is still a lot of reserve remaining. Okay? So, if you go on the upper part of the respiratory tree, this means you can, the moment you collapse or you restrict that, you have problem getting air in and out. And on the other hand, if you have this restriction farther down, the large number of bronchioli is going to keep you alive still. Okay? So much for that. Let's come into the mechanisms with which the different particles that we inhale are deposited in our airways. We already alluded to that. We already said that only up to the 10th generation of divisions you are going to have something to do with this, something to remove these things, because only up to that point you produce mucus, and from that point down to the periphery, that is, you depend on the macrophages for cleaning up your system. Okay? So, the inhaled particles are deposited in the airways in three ways. The first is precipitation. Okay? Sedimentation, Brownian movement, turbulence, and whatever else you have, they all contribute to those three ways. And those three ways are this following. First, impaction. Second, sedimentation. And the third, diffusion. Now, what does impaction mean? Let's start from that. Impaction means that you have a particle that is carried by a stream, and when the stream has to bend, it just throws the particle to the closest surface available. In other words, if you had a straight pipe, you would never have impaction. But the moment you have a pipe that either bifurcates or takes a bend, then obviously whatever you carry is going to go and hit the side. And this is the way all big particles are trapped inside our system. Particles of about 10 microns and above are trapped in the nose and in the nasopharynx, and this is the way that our nose cleans the air that we breathe. For example, if you walk through a storm that has a lot of dust, a dust storm, this doesn't mean that the dust is going to get into your trachea. Why? Because as you breathe, your nasopharynx makes such a tortuous movement of the air that flows in, that all these particles are going to hit the sides and be trapped there. It is the same reason why you have hair in your nose. Okay? They act as filter, and the filter works by impaction. If we go past that point of the 10 microns and we go into smaller particles, particles between 2 and 10 microns, these are precipitating in the large intrathoracic airways. Okay? And as this become smaller and smaller, why do they precipitate in the large airways? Because they are small enough to pass through the filters of the nasopharynx. But if you go farther down, only 20% of the particles of 2 micrometers in size, okay, are held back by impaction. Everything else passes through. Okay? On the right side, you have a diagram that allows you to see the areas through which you have the impaction being active. Okay? Can you see it there?
Yeah.
Good. Now, let's go to the next process that we alluded to, sedimentation. Sedimentation is a process where the weight of the particle itself is what makes it settle down. Okay? Where does it work? It works in those parts of the lung that have low velocity of the air that passes through, the gas that passes through. Okay? And in those cases, the sedimentation is an overlapping process, if you want, with the impaction. Why? Because it concerns particles between 0.2 of a micron and 5 microns. Okay? But as I said before, you are not going to see sedimentation beginning to have effect before you reach the 4th generation of bronchi. In other words, you start getting into the smaller bronchi before sedimentation in itself plays a role. Why that? Can you think of one reason why sedimentation plays a bigger role as you go farther down rather than the other way around?
Because you have more space to sediment, place to sediment into.
Well, you are getting there. It's not the space.
Or area.
The cross area, right. It means that as we go down the tree, or up the tree, whichever way you like, as we go towards the periphery, we start having a larger total cross-sectional area of the bronchi. Therefore, what this means? It means that the velocity of the air drops. Correct? So once the velocity drops, you don't have the forces that will impact. This is where the word impaction comes from. That will impact the particles on the sides. And the flow of air becomes less turbulent, it becomes more linear, and therefore sedimentation starts becoming effective. Okay? Now, last but not least is diffusion. Diffusion concerns particles that are smaller than 1/10 of a micron. And these, in effect, are deposited by molecular movement throughout all the periphery of the airways of the lungs. Throughout. Now, this, remember we talked about smoking earlier. This is why smoking is problematic, because it gets inside us very, very small particles which diffuse everywhere. They just don't stop only at the point of where you have impaction or where you have sedimentation. Okay? Now, how do we clean the system? Because this is the second thing we have to really worry about. Okay, we deposit all these materials, we deposit all these particles. How do we clean it? Okay, we alluded already into two processes. One was mucus production, right, in the upper airway. The other was by removing them through the macrophages. This was for the high order truncations, bifurcations. But there are two other ways that we use in conjunction. The first one is the reflexes of the airways. What we mean by reflex, we are talking about a nervous reflex, a nervous system reflex. If we stimulate the extrathoracic airways. What is an extrathoracic airway? Our larynx is extrathoracic. Our nose is extrathoracic. Okay? Our mouth cavity is extrathoracic. So, if we stimulate those with noxious stimuli, then we have reflex narrowing of the intrathoracic airways, and this is done through the action of the vagus nerve. What is the other nerve for the vagus? The other name?
Cranial nerve number 10.
Number 10. Okay. Now, what do we do by that is we force by a reflex mechanism the restriction of the bronchial gas flow, and therefore we don't allow deep penetration of particles. The particles that are noxious are not going to go that far in. Okay? They are not going to go because as you move this, as you narrow the pipes, what will happen is the velocity will increase, so you'll have more impaction, and you will not going to let a lot of air go through, irrespective of increased velocity, and therefore you're going to take inside your system less and less particles. There is a second reflex, and this is the cough reflex. Okay? This is the opposite of the previous. The previous was a reflex that was trying to stop particles from flowing in. It was a reflex that was trying to eliminate from your system, by default, so to speak, particles from flowing in. Cough reflex is exactly the opposite. It's a defensive reflex, and it tries to get out of your system particles that have already lodged there. Now, what happens here is the following. You restrict the airway so that in the process of trying to breathe, you increase the pressures a lot. And then reflexively, you open up, and all this explosive flow of gas that comes out with the cough is big enough to dislodge all the particles that have lodged on the sides of the airways and throw them out. Okay? Just so that you remember this, when you cough, inside your upper airways, the speed of air can reach half the speed of sound. Almost as fast as a turboprop flies. Okay? So that's, when you cough in the face of someone, remember you can do a lot of damage. Now, we already talked about, excuse me. You like that, huh? Okay, excuse me, let me just turn it off and I'll get back to them. Now, we already talked about goblet cells, and what did those cells do? Nice cough. Good reflex. Okay, what did goblet cells do in the lung?
Mucus secretion.
Mucus secretion. Okay. So now we said that this mucus secretion is moving up through the movement of the cilia, and let's see what the mucociliary transport is like. This proceeds from the terminal bronchi up to the larynx. Okay? And it occurs in a very, very tortuous flows and pathways. What you have to keep in mind, that particles can come out with it as long as they are on the path of the flow of mucus. Otherwise, there is no way they can be transported. As we said, the mucus is produced by goblet cells and the seromucous glands. Now, the seromucous glands are about, they are fairly large in size, and they produce quite a bit of secretion. The volume of a goblet cell.
1 second. What is capricious?
Capricious is something that is doing a caprice, which means it is something that you cannot predict. there is a musical piece called Capriccio Italiano. If you, for those of you that like classical music, okay, it is not a Greek word for sure, and it is definitely an English word. Anyway, understood it?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, George,
Yeah.
is it possible that you can email this to us, the lecture slides, and you can email it?
I have already done it. They are there. They didn't give them to you this morning?
No,
No,
to
no, no.
us, like to our individual
Oh, you want it
accounts.
personally? Of course. My pleasure.
Okay, because it's very hard for us to transfer it from their system to our computers.
No problem. No problem. Do you still have the same emails that I have?
Email? Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
you are going to receive them over the weekend.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I talk about exchanging emails. I have to say one thing. First of all, I want to thank all of you because you all remembered me during the holidays to send a greeting. But I really have to say that I don't get comments from you, and this I don't like to be flying on an automatic pilot. I really need your comments. Okay? Anyway, I'm going to send them immediately to you. Thanks. Now, the volume of a goblet cell, we said, is about 1/10 of a milliliter. Okay? It's a very small cell. I mean, it's a very small volume, but as cells come, it's a very large cell. And a whole gland is about 4 milliliters. Okay? So again, it's not that minute. I mean, if you examine the surface of the bronchi, you can see them actually. You can literally spot them with a magnifying glass. Now, the mucus is transported by the ciliated epithelium, and I really want you to look at what I underlined in red here, that there are certain things that decrease the transport. And I want you to use your head right now a little bit. For example, we say that we decrease the transport in the presence of high concentrations of oxygen. We decrease the transport in terms of high concentrations of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, atropine, cholinergic drugs, and parasympathetic stimulants. Now, why do you think, I mean, let's leave atropine, cholinergic drugs, and parasympathetic stimulants out, because this means that they work through the same methods that the nervous system works, okay? In other words, these are signals that the body normally uses. But why would a high concentration of oxygen, for example, make the ciliated transport go lower? Does that sound to you like it has a purpose? Why would our body adapt in such a way?
Because reduces absorption.
Well, there are two things that I would like you to think. I mean, neither of them may be absolutely right, but you should be able to be thinking in these terms. Okay? The first is that oxygen in itself, when there is a lot of oxygen in itself is, we said it last time I think, is a substance that is poisonous for the body. Okay? In fact, all the damage is done by oxidation. This is why antioxidants are so good for us. So, indeed, the body, if it is in the presence of a lot of oxygen, may be trying to not be so energetic under conditions that do it harm. There is another side of it also, of the coin, that if you have sufficient amount of oxygen, why should you bother with it, okay? It's a good thing to have. You can't improve much more on that. So there are these two things that you should think for once. Now, carbon dioxide is a little bit different. In my mind, carbon dioxide reduces the transport, because if you have increased carbon dioxide in the air, you are going to breathe more often. And if you breathe more often, because carbon dioxide enhances